When we think about a massive city like Lima, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably Spanish conquistadors, right? But the real story, the deep story, is so much more complex. It's all about layers. What you see on the surface is just the beginning. So let's peel back those layers and see what we find.
So let's just get right to it. Did Lima's entire story kick off in 1535 when Francisco Pizarro showed up? Was this place really just an empty canvas, a blank slate waiting for the Spanish to arrive?
Yeah, the answer is a big fat no. It's not that simple at all. Lima is a city of layers. Think of it like a geological dig, a stratification of cultures, where every new era was built, and I mean literally built, right on top of the last one. And that right there, that's the key to unlocking its real history. All right, so let's dig into that first layer. We're going way back, long before any Spanish ships were on the horizon. We're talking about a time when the Rimac Valley wasn't just a piece of land. It was a highly sophisticated system of power, and it all revolved around one single, incredibly precious resource.
And here it is, hydraulic engineering. Now, this sounds technical, but it's actually a really cool concept. In this super arid coastal desert, gold wasn't the ultimate prize, water was. The societies that were here before had built this incredible, complex network of canals and aqueducts. The logic was simple. If you control the water, you controlled everything. So you can imagine when the Spanish showed up, they didn't just stumble upon an empty valley. No way. They found a sophisticated, well-run territory, and the guy in charge was a man named Talisco. He was basically the regional governor, appointed by the Incas, and his decision to welcome the Spanish, well, that wasn't him giving up. It was a smart, strategic political move. The Inca Empire was falling apart, and he was trying to keep things stable for his people. Okay, moving on to the next layer. And this one is all about how the Spanish didn't just build a new city. What they did was a very deliberate, very symbolic act of replacement. They basically slapped a checkerboard of their own power right on top of the old world.
And this is the perfect example of that strategy. Pizarro didn't just throw a dart at a map to decide where to build his palace. Not at all. He built it right on top of the ruins of Tulish Cusco's house. So why there? Because that exact spot was the nerve center for the entire valley's water system. By taking that one location, he took control of the valley's lifeblood. Super symbolic and super practical.
And this pattern wasn't just about political power, it was about spiritual power too. It was a common playbook all across the Americas. You find the most important indigenous temple, you tear it down, and you build your church right on top of it. The message couldn't be clearer, right? It's a powerful visual statement that a new faith and a new world order are now in charge.
So, you've taken over. How do you control this new city? You put it on a grid, a super rigid checkerboard of exactly 117 blocks. They called it the Damero de Pizarro. And trust me, this wasn't about making it look pretty. This design was all about military surveillance and administrative control. Everything radiated out from that central plaza, making it easy to watch and to manage.
And here's a little fun fact that a lot of people mix up. You've probably heard Lima called the City of Kings, right? Most people assume that means the kings of Spain, but nope. Pizarro actually got the news that this site was perfect for his new capital on January 6th. And what's January 6th? It's the Catholic Feast of the Epiphany, the day celebrating the visit of the three wise men, or the Magi Kings.
So building a city is one thing, but actually living in it? That's a whole other story. The colonial era wasn't static. It was defined by these massive forces, both natural and man-made, that were constantly shaping and reshaping life in Lima, literally from the ground up. And then, in 1746, nature just unleashed. A catastrophic earthquake, followed by a tsunami, completely flattened the city. I mean, it was gone. And it's because everything had been built with this heavy, rigid stone. The rebuilding effort, though, was an absolute game changer for architecture. They learned their lesson and switched to lighter, more flexible stuff like wood and plaster. This created this totally unique, earthquake-resistant style that we now call Lima Baroque. Colonial Lima was a city of wild contrasts. On one hand, you had the elite, looking down on the world from these gorgeous, ornate wooden balconies, creating these sort of aerial streets where they lived their lives above everyone else. But then, deep below, in the shadows, you had the subterranean terror of the Spanish Inquisition. In these damp, cold cells, they used fear and torture to enforce religious and social order. Two completely different worlds existing in the same city. Of course, if you're going to run an empire, you need smart people, right? You need bureaucrats, lawyers, doctors. And to train them, the Spanish crown founded the University of San Marcos all the way back in 1551. And get this, it is the oldest continuously operating university in all of the Americas. That's incredible. It was truly the brain of the New World.
And if you look at what they taught at the very beginning, it tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. You had theology and arts, that's to shape the soul and culture. You had law and canons, that's for running the whole imperial machine. And of course, medicine, to take care of the body. This place was literally an assembly line for the people who would build and run the colonial world.
For about 200 years, Lima was the absolute economic powerhouse of South America. It had a total monopoly on all trade with Spain. All the silver, all the goods, it all went through Lima. But look what happens next. After 1776, Spain changes the rules. It creates new viceroyalties, and just like that, Lima's monopoly is shattered. You add that to the crazy cost of rebuilding after the 1746 earthquake, and yeah, the city starts a long, slow economic slide.
And that brings us to our final layer. This is where all the pieces of the puzzle, the indigenous foundations, the colonial ambition, the economic troubles, all of it comes together to forge the independent and, I think, incredibly resilient city that we see today.
So, in the early 1800s, Lima goes through this massive identity crisis. It flips from being the most loyal, pro-Spain city in the Americas to the capital of a brand new republic. It all happened fast. General José de San Martín arrives in 1820, which gets the ball rolling. A year later, in 1821, they're proclaiming independence right in the Plaza Mayor, the very heart of Spanish power. And by 1824, the Battle of Ayacucho makes it official. Spanish rule is over for good.
And the coolest part about Lima today is that all these layers are still right there, out in the open. They're not buried. You can literally be standing next to an ancient pre-Hispanic pyramid, they call them huacas, and see a modern glass skyscraper right behind it. You can walk out of a massive Baroque cathedral and into a public square that celebrates independence from Spain. The city doesn't just remember its past, it lives inside of it, all at once. So, really, the main takeaway here is that Lima is like a living book, a document of its own incredibly complex history, and you can read every chapter just by walking around. And that kind of leaves us with a question, doesn't it? If you were to look really closely at the streets where you live, what layers of history, of replacement, of resilience, of reinvention are hidden right under your feet?